The morning of Dad's funeral dawned gray and heavy, matching the weight in my chest. Rain threatened from the dark clouds gathering over downtown Chicago, and I stood at my bedroom window watching the city wake up, while my world felt like it was ending. The smell of coffee drifted up from the kitchen where my husband Nathan was already moving around, probably checking his phone for work emails, even on a day like this. "Caroline, we need to leave in 30 minutes!" His voice carried up the stairs, flat and businesslike. No warmth, no comfort in his tone. Just another item on his schedule to check off. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and closed my eyes. Dad had been sick for 8 months, battling the cancer that slowly stole pieces of him until there was nothing left but memories and the sound of machines beeping in that sterile hospital room. I thought I was prepared for this day, but standing here in my black dress, I realized nothing could have prepared me for the finality of it all. The funeral home was packed when we arrived. People I hadn't seen in years filled the pews, all dressed in their somber best, whispering quiet condolences and sharing stories about Dad's impact on their lives. He had been a successful contractor, building half the homes in our suburb, but more than that, he was the kind of man who would drop everything to help a neighbor fix a leaky roof or teach a kid how to throw a baseball. I sat in the front row between Nathan and my younger brother Eric, who had flown in from Seattle the night before. His wife Jessica sat beside him, holding their 2-year-old daughter Lily, who kept asking in her tiny voice why everyone looked so sad. The innocence of her questions brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Mommy Caroline crying?" Lily pointed at me with her chubby finger. "Yes, sweetheart," Jessica whispered, smoothing Lily's blonde curls. "She's sad because Grandpa went to heaven." Nathan shifted beside me, his jaw tight with what I recognized as impatience. He'd been like this for months, ever since Dad's diagnosis became terminal. While I spent weekends at the hospital, reading to Dad or just sitting quietly with him, Nathan found excuses to stay home. Work commitments, golf games, anything to avoid confronting the reality of death. The pastor began speaking about Dad's life, about his faith, his dedication to family, his generosity to others. With each word, I felt the tears coming harder. Dad had walked me down the aisle 7 years ago, beaming with pride as he placed my hand in Nathan's. He'd been so hopeful about our marriage, so sure Nathan was the right man for me. He was always there when people needed him most. The pastor continued. Robert Sullivan was a man who believed in showing love through action, in being present for life's most important moments. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here we were at one of life's most important moments, and Nathan was checking his watch. When they opened the floor for people to share memories, I knew I had to speak. My legs felt shaky as I stood, but I needed to honor Dad's memory with words from my heart. I walked to the podium and looked out at all the faces, people whose lives Dad had touched in some way. "My father taught me that love isn't just a feeling," I began, my voice barely steady. "It's a choice you make every single day." He chose to love my mother through 35 years of marriage, even when Alzheimer's stole her memories in the final years. He chose to love Eric and me not just when we were easy to love, but when we were stubborn teenagers who thought we knew everything. I paused, seeing Nathan's face in the front row. He was looking at his phone screen, barely listening. Dad showed up. I continued, my voice growing stronger. "When I had my miscarriage 3 years ago, he drove through a snowstorm to sit with me in the hospital. He didn't say much, just held my hand and stayed. That's who he was. Present. Constant. Real." As I spoke those words, I realized how much I'd been craving that kind of love in my own marriage. The kind of love that shows up, that stays, that chooses you even when you're broken. After the service, we moved to the cemetery where Dad would be buried next to Mom. The wind had picked up, making the autumn leaves dance around the headstones. I stood at the edge of the grave, watching as they lowered the casket, and the tears came in waves I couldn't control. That's when Nathan leaned close to my ear, his breath hot against my skin, and whispered, "Stop crying. You're being dramatic." The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to stare at him, this man I'd promised to love for better or worse, and saw nothing but irritation in his eyes. While I was grieving the loss of the most important man in my life, he was worried about appearances. "Dramatic," I whispered back, my voice barely audible. "People are staring, Caroline. You need to pull yourself together." I looked around and realized he was right. People were watching, but not with judgment. With sympathy, with understanding, with the kind of compassion you show someone who's just lost their father. Everyone except my husband. After the burial, we gathered at the law office of Dad's attorney, Mr. Patterson, for the reading of the will. The office smelled like old leather and coffee, with dark wood paneling and diplomas covering the walls. Nathan sat beside me, already looking impatient to get this over with and get back to his normal routine. Eric and Jessica were there with Lily, along with a few of Dad's closest friends and business partners. I expected this to be straightforward. Dad had always been organized, methodical. He'd probably left everything split between Eric and me, with maybe some small bequests to his friends. Mr. Patterson adjusted his glasses and opened the thick folder containing Dad's final wishes. Robert was very specific about how he wanted his estate handled, he began. He spent considerable time updating this will over the past year, making sure every detail reflected his true intentions. The first few items were small bequests to longtime employees and friends. Dad's watch went to his foreman, Tom, his fishing gear to his buddy Frank, his tools to Eric, which made sense since Eric had followed Dad into construction. Then Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and looked directly at me. To my daughter Caroline Mitchell, who has shown me the true meaning of unconditional love and loyalty, I leave the house at 1247 Maple Street, all its contents, and the sum of $400,000. My mouth fell open. The house was Dad's pride and joy, a beautiful Victorian he'd restored himself over 20 years. It was worth at least $500,000. Combined with the cash, he'd left me the majority of his estate. Wait, Nathan interrupted, sitting forward in his chair. What about Eric? Shouldn't it be split equally? Mr. Patterson continued reading. To my son Eric, I leave my share of the construction business, valued at approximately $200,000, along with all business equipment and vehicles. Eric nodded, seeming satisfied with his inheritance. The business was something he could build on, and it was more than fair. But Nathan wasn't finished. I don't understand. Why would Caroline get so much more? She's married now. She doesn't need all that money. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I felt every eye in the room turn to look at Nathan, then at me. The implication was clear. Since I was married to him, what was mine was his, so why should I inherit anything significant? Mr. Patterson's expression grew cold as he looked at Nathan. Actually, Mr. Mitchell, there's more. He turned back to his papers. Robert included a letter to be read specifically in Caroline's presence. He pulled out an envelope with my name written in Dad's familiar handwriting. The sight of it brought fresh tears to my eyes. My dearest Caroline, Mr. Patterson read. If you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and I hope I've left you with enough good memories to outweigh the sadness of this moment. I want you to know that watching you care for your mother, and then for me, during these final months has been the greatest gift of my life. You showed up every weekend, every holiday, every time I needed you. You read to me, talked to me, held my hand when the pain was bad. You never once complained or acted like it was a burden. I was crying again, but this time I didn't care what Nathan thought. I also want you to know that I've been watching, and I've been worried. The man you married has not shown you the love and support you deserve. During your mother's funeral, while you were grieving, he was on his phone. When you lost your baby, he went golfing instead of staying home with you. When I was dying, he couldn't be bothered to visit more than twice. The room was completely silent now. I could feel Nathan's anger radiating beside me, but I couldn't look at him. Caroline, you deserve a partner who chooses you every single day, who shows up when life gets hard, who doesn't see your emotions as an inconvenience. You deserve the kind of love your mother and I shared. Don't settle for less just because it's easier than starting over. Mr. Patterson folded the letter and handed it to me. There's one more provision, Caroline. Your father has placed the house and money in a trust that's yours alone. Your husband has no legal claim to any of it. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan's face had gone red, and I could see the vein in his temple throbbing the way it did when he was furious. Eric was staring at his hands, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding in front of lawyers and friends. This is ridiculous, Nathan finally exploded. He can't just exclude me from Caroline's inheritance. We're married. What's hers is mine. Actually, Mr. Patterson said calmly, in Illinois, Inherited assets can remain separate property if properly structured, which Robert was careful to do. Caroline's inheritance belongs to her alone. I clutched the letter to my chest, feeling Dad's love surrounding me even in death. He'd seen what I'd been too afraid to acknowledge, that my marriage was hollow, that Nathan saw me as an obligation rather than a partner, that I'd been slowly disappearing under the weight of his indifference. "Caroline, we need to talk about this," Nathan said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "This isn't right. Your father had no business interfering in our marriage." But as I looked at him, I realized Dad hadn't interfered. He'd simply seen the truth and given me the tools to face it. For the first time in years, I had choices. I had independence. I had the security to make decisions based on what I needed, not what was easiest. The meeting ended with awkward goodbyes and promises to be in touch about the paperwork. Nathan was silent during the drive home, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. I stared out the window at the familiar streets of our suburban neighborhood, seeing them with new eyes. When we pulled into our driveway, the house looked different somehow. Smaller, less permanent. It was a nice house, nothing wrong with it, but it had never felt like home the way Dad's house on Maple Street always had. "We need to talk," Nathan said as soon as we walked through the front door. I set my purse down and turned to face him, still holding Dad's letter. The man standing in front of me looked like a stranger. When had his eyes become so cold? When had his mouth developed that perpetual frown of dissatisfaction? "Your father had no right to poison you against me," he began, pacing back and forth across our living room. "This whole thing is his way of controlling you from the grave." "He wasn't trying to control me," I said quietly. "He was trying to protect me." "Protect you from what?" "From your husband. From the man you promised to love and honor." The irony of those words wasn't lost on me. Love and honor. When was the last time Nathan had shown me either? He was protecting me from a marriage where I'm constantly made to feel like my emotions are too much, where I'm criticized for caring too deeply, where I'm alone even when I'm not alone. Nathan stopped pacing and stared at me. "That's not true, isn't it? Today, at my father's funeral, you told me I was being dramatic for crying, for grieving the man who raised me, who loved me unconditionally, who was always there when I needed him. You were making a scene. I was saying goodbye to my father." We stood there looking at each other across the gulf that had been widening between us for years. I could see that Nathan genuinely didn't understand why his behavior was hurtful. In his mind, emotions were messy inconveniences to be managed, not valid human experiences to be honored. "So what now?" he asked. "Are you going to let a dead man ruin our marriage?" "Our marriage was already ruined, Nathan. Dad just helped me see it." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with 7 years of disappointment and loneliness. As the sun set outside our window, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that this was the beginning of the end. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Nathan slept beside me, his breathing deep and untroubled. The events of the day played on repeat in my mind. Dad's funeral, Nathan's cruel words, the reading of the will, and that letter that had laid bare the truth about my marriage. I slipped out of bed quietly and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The house felt different in the darkness, like it was holding its breath. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table with Dad's letter spread out in front of me, reading his words again by the light of my phone. "You deserve a partner who chooses you every single day." The phrase echoed in my head as I thought about all the times Nathan had chosen something else. His work, his golf games, his comfort zone. Never me. Not when it mattered. The next morning, Nathan was already gone when I woke up. He'd left a note saying he had an early meeting and would be home late. No mention of the previous day, no acknowledgement of what had happened between us. Just back to business as usual. I called in sick to work. As a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, I had some flexibility, and after losing Dad and facing the reality of my marriage, I needed time to think. Instead of staying home, I drove to Dad's house on Maple Street. The Victorian sat on a quiet, tree-lined street in the historic district of our town. Dad had bought it when I was in high school, a fixer-upper that most people would have torn down. But he saw potential in it, just like he saw potential in people. Over the years, he'd lovingly restored every room, from the original hardwood floors to the wraparound porch with its intricate gingerbread trim. I sat in my car for a few minutes, looking at the house that was now mine. The morning sun filtered through the maple trees in the front yard, casting dancing shadows across the porch. Dad used to sit out there in his rocking chair on summer evenings, waving at neighbors as they walked their dogs or pushed strollers down the sidewalk. Using the key Dad had given me years ago, I let myself in through the front door. The house smelled like him: Old Spice aftershave, coffee, and the faint scent of sawdust that never quite left his clothes. Everything was exactly as he'd left it, as if he might walk through the door at any moment asking if I wanted some lunch. I wandered through the rooms slowly, seeing them with new eyes. The living room with its stone fireplace and built-in bookshelves lined with Dad's collection of westerns and biographies. The kitchen he'd renovated for Mom before she got sick, with its farmhouse sink and vintage tile backsplash. The sunroom off the back, where Mom used to tend her orchids before Alzheimer's stole her green thumb along with everything else. In Dad's study, I found photo albums covering every surface. Pictures of him and Mom on their wedding day, young and radiant with hope. Photos of Eric and me as babies, toddlers, awkward teenagers, proud graduates. And then the more recent pictures, my wedding day 7 years ago. I picked up the album from my wedding, flipping through pages of carefully preserved memories. There I was in my white dress, glowing with happiness as Dad walked me down the aisle. Nathan looked handsome in his tuxedo, smiling broadly as we exchanged vows. In the photos, we looked like the perfect couple. Young, attractive, full of dreams for the future. But as I studied the pictures more closely, I started to notice things I'd missed before. In the reception photos, while I was laughing and dancing with my friends and family, Nathan was often at the edge of the frame, checking his phone or talking business with his groomsmen. During our first dance, I was looking at him with pure love in my eyes, but he was looking over my shoulder at something else. The signs had been there from the beginning. I'd just been too in love to see them. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jennifer. "How are you holding up? I've been thinking about you since yesterday." Jennifer had been my college roommate and maid of honor at my wedding. She lived across town with her husband and 3 kids, and we tried to get together for coffee at least once a month. She was one of the few people who had always been honest with me about Nathan, though I'd been too defensive to listen. I texted back, "Can we meet for coffee? I need to talk." "Of course. The usual place in an hour." I spent the next hour walking through Dad's house, making mental notes of everything that would need to be done. The estate lawyer had said I could take as much time as I needed to decide what to do with the property, but sitting in Dad's chair in the living room I already knew. This house felt more like home than the sterile suburban tract house Nathan and I shared. Jennifer was already at our usual corner table when I arrived at the coffee shop downtown. She took one look at my face and stood up to hug me. "Oh, honey, you look exhausted. How are you really doing?" I ordered my usual vanilla latte and sat down across from her. Jennifer had the kind of warm, open face that invited confessions. She was the person I'd called when I miscarried 3 years ago, sobbing into the phone while Nathan played video games in the next room. "Dad left me everything," I said without preamble. "The house, most of his money. And he wrote me a letter about Nathan." Jennifer's eyebrows rose. "What kind of letter?" I pulled out the folded pages and handed them to her. She read in silence, her expression growing more serious with each paragraph. "Caroline," she said when she finished reading, "your dad saw what the rest of us have been trying to tell you for years." "What do you mean?" "Nathan doesn't treat you well. He never has. You've just been making excuses for him for so long that you can't see it anymore." I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl around the cup. "Give me examples." "Okay." Jennifer leaned forward. "Your miscarriage. While you were bleeding and heartbroken, he told you that at least it happened early and suggested you should just try again right away. No grief, no acknowledgement of what you'd lost." The memory stung. I'd wanted to name the baby, to have some kind of ceremony to mark what might have been. Nathan had said that was morbid and dwelling on the negative. "When your mom was dying," Jennifer continued, "you spent every weekend at the nursing home. Nathan complained constantly about how you were never home, how he felt neglected. He actually said that to me at Tom's birthday party, complained about his wife caring for her dying mother." I remember that conversation. Nathan had been frustrated because I'd missed his company's golf tournament to sit with Mom during one of her bad days. And yesterday, Jennifer's voice grew soft, I saw him at the funeral, Caroline. While you were giving that beautiful speech about your dad, he was scrolling through his phone. At your father's funeral, he said I was being dramatic for crying. Jesus Christ. Jennifer sat back in her chair. Caroline, that's not normal. That's not how someone who loves you behaves. I felt the tears starting again, but this time they weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of recognition, of finally seeing clearly what had been in front of me all along. I don't know how to leave him, I whispered. We've been together for 10 years, married for 7. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just emotional because of Dad? Honey, you're not wrong. And you're not alone. You have options now. She was right. For the first time since I'd married Nathan, I had real options. The house on Maple Street, the money Dad had left me, the trust that Nathan couldn't touch. I could leave if I wanted to. I could start over. But the thought terrified me. I'd been with Nathan since I was 25. I'd built my entire adult life around our marriage, our shared friends, our suburban routine. Who would I be without it? I think I need some time away, I said, to think clearly. You could stay at the house on Maple Street, Jennifer suggested. Take some time to figure out what you want. That would mean telling Nathan I'm considering leaving. Caroline, after yesterday, I think he already knows something's changed. She was right again. The way Nathan had looked at me after the will reading, the anger in his eyes, the accusation in his voice. He knew Dad's letter had shifted something fundamental between us. I spent the rest of the afternoon at Dad's house, going through his closets and personal belongings. It was painful work, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. Each item told a story. The flannel shirt he'd worn every weekend, the coffee mug I'd made him in pottery class when I was 12, the stack of birthday cards from Mom before her memory faded. In his bedroom dresser, I found a manila envelope with my name on it. Inside were the deed to the house, insurance papers, and another letter in his handwriting. This one was shorter, more practical. Caroline, if you're reading this, you decided to go through my things. I hope this house brings you as much joy as it brought your mother and me. It's a place where love lived, where family gathered, where every room holds memories of laughter and tears and all the ordinary moments that make up a life. I always hoped you'd live here someday, maybe raise your own children in these rooms. But more than that, I hope it's a place where you can be yourself, completely and without apology. Love, Dad. By the time I got home that evening, Nathan was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a beer and a stack of papers spread out in front of him. Where have you been all day? He asked without looking up. At Dad's house, going through his things. You should have waited for me. We need to discuss what to do with that property. We. Now he looked up. Caroline, I'm your husband. We make decisions together. The house belongs to me, Nathan. The lawyer was very clear about that. Legally, maybe. But in a marriage, we're supposed to be partners. What affects you affects me. I set my purse down and looked at this man I'd shared a bed with for 7 years. When I was affected by losing our baby, you told me to get over it. When I was affected by Mom's Alzheimer's, you complained that I was never home. When I was affected by Dad's cancer, you said I was spending too much time at the hospital. So forgive me if I don't believe you're suddenly interested in partnership. Nathan's face darkened. That's not fair. I've supported you through all of those things. How? By going golfing while I grieved? By telling me my emotions were too much? By making me feel guilty for caring about my family? I never said you couldn't care about your family. No, you just made it clear that my caring inconvenienced you. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, 7 years of resentment and disappointment filling the space between us. I could see Nathan calculating, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. Look, he said, his tone shifting to the reasonable, patronizing voice he used when he thought I was being irrational. I know yesterday was emotional. Funerals make people say and think things they don't mean. Your father was probably not thinking clearly when he wrote that letter. Dad's mind was perfectly clear right up until the end. He was on pain medication, Caroline. He was angry at the world for being sick. He took it out on me because I was an easy target. Or maybe he saw our marriage clearly because he wasn't living in the middle of it. Nathan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is exactly what he wanted. He wanted to drive a wedge between us. Can't you see that? Why would Dad want that? He walked me down the aisle, Nathan. He wanted me to be happy. And you're not happy? After 7 years of marriage, after everything I've given you, you're not happy. The question hung in the air between us. It was the first time either of us had asked it directly, and I realized I'd been avoiding the answer for years. No, I said quietly. I'm not happy. The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. Nathan stared at me like I'd slapped him. What do you want me to say to that? What do you want me to do? I don't know. I honestly don't know. He sat back down heavily, running his hands through his hair. So what happens now? Are you going to leave me because your dead father told you to? I'm going to take some time to think. Away from here, away from us, away from everything familiar. Where? Dad's house. I'm going to stay there for a while. For how long? I don't know. Nathan's face cycled through anger, disbelief, and something that might have been fear. Caroline, if you leave, if you do this, I don't know if we can come back from it. I know. And I did know. Walking away from our marriage, even temporarily, would change everything between us. There would be no going back to the way things were, no pretending that everything was fine. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Maybe it was time to stop pretending. I spent the next 3 days moving my clothes and personal items to Dad's house on Maple Street. Nathan watched from the doorway as I packed my suitcases, his face a mixture of anger and bewilderment. He'd oscillated between trying to talk me out of leaving and acting like my decision was just a temporary tantrum that would blow over. This is ridiculous, Caroline, he said as I folded sweaters into my largest suitcase. You're throwing away 7 years of marriage because of some letter. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm taking time to think about what I really want. What you want? What about what we want? What about the life we've built together? I paused in my packing and looked around our bedroom. Everything was neutral beiges and grays, the kind of designer catalog look that Nathan preferred. Clean lines, no clutter, no personality. I realized I couldn't point to a single item in the room that was truly mine, that reflected who I was as an individual. What life have we built, Nathan? Really? We go to work, come home, eat dinner while watching TV, go to bed and repeat. On weekends you play golf or watch sports while I catch up on housework or visit family. When was the last time we had a real conversation about anything that mattered? We talk all the time. We exchange information. You tell me about your work projects. I tell you about mine. You complain about traffic. I mention what I'm making for dinner. That's not talking. That's just coexisting. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, watching me zip up my toiletry bag. So this is my fault? Everything wrong with our marriage is because I'm not emotional enough for you. It's not about being emotional. It's about being present. It's about caring enough to show up when it matters. I show up. Do you? When I had food poisoning last month and couldn't keep anything down, you left me alone to go to your brother's barbecue because you'd already RSVP'd. When my car broke down downtown in the rain, you told me to call a tow truck because you were in the middle of a conference call. When I wanted to talk about trying for another baby after the miscarriage, you said we'd discuss it later and then never brought it up again. Each example hit home, and I could see Nathan's defensive walls going up higher with every word. I work hard to provide for us, Caroline. I can't drop everything every time you have a crisis. A crisis? Nathan, those weren't crises. They were just life. Normal, everyday moments when your wife needed you to choose her over whatever else was competing for your attention. I zipped the suitcase closed and set it by the door with the others. 3 suitcases for 7 years of marriage. It seemed like it should be more. How long are you going to do this? Nathan asked. Stay at your father's house feeling sorry for yourself. I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly worried about inconveniencing you. The truth of that statement hit me as I said it. I had spent years modifying my behavior, dulling my emotions, shrinking myself to fit into the narrow space Nathan had allowed me in our relationship. Fine. Nathan stood up abruptly. Go stay in that old house. Sleep in your dead father's bed. But don't expect me to put my life on hold waiting for you to come to your senses. I wouldn't expect that. Something in my calm response seemed to unnerve him more than if I'd gotten angry. He'd expected me to fight, to cry, to beg him not to give up on us. Instead, I was just accepting the consequences of my choice with a peace that surprised even me. That afternoon, I carried my last load of belongings up the front steps of Dad's house. The porch creaked under my weight, a familiar sound from childhood visits. I'd spent countless summer afternoons on this porch, reading books in the swing while Dad worked in his garden, and Mom called to us from the kitchen about dinner being ready soon. Inside, the house felt different now that I was living in it rather than just visiting. It was mine, really mine, in a way nothing had been for years. I chose Dad's bedroom as my own, not out of morbidity, but because it had the best view of the backyard garden and caught the morning sun perfectly. That first night alone, I made myself a simple dinner of scrambled eggs and toast, eating at Dad's kitchen table while watching the sunset through the window. The silence felt profound after years of Nathan's constant TV background noise. I could hear birds settling in for the night, the distant sound of children playing in a neighbor's yard, the gentle hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe fully. The next few days fell into a rhythm. I'd wake up early, make coffee in Dad's old percolator, and sit on the front porch watching the neighborhood come to life. Families walking to the school bus stop, joggers making their morning rounds, elderly Mr. Peterson across the street tending to his prize-winning roses. I called into work and arranged to use my accumulated vacation days. My boss, Sharon, was understanding when I explained that I was dealing with family matters after Dad's death. She didn't pry, just told me to take the time I needed and that they'd manage my current projects until I returned. On my third day at the house, I was sorting through Dad's books in his study when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see Jennifer standing on the porch holding a casserole dish and wearing the concerned expression she got when she was in full caretaking mode. "You look better," she said as soon as I opened the door. "More like yourself." "I feel more like myself." "Come in." She handed me the casserole. Chicken and rice. Tom's grandmother's recipe. I figured you probably weren't eating much. We sat in Dad's living room with cups of tea, and I found myself telling her about the strange peace I'd found in the old house, about waking up without the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach that I'd carried for years without even realizing it. "Nathan's been calling Tom," Jennifer said carefully. "He's pretty angry. He's telling people you're having some kind of breakdown, that grief is making you irrational." "Of course he is. It's easier than admitting there might be real problems in our marriage." Tom asked me what he should say to him. I told him to just listen and not take sides. But honestly, Caroline, Nathan's version of events doesn't match what I've witnessed over the years. I appreciated Jennifer's loyalty, but I also knew that my leaving Nathan was going to create ripples through our entire social circle. Most of our friends were couple friends, people we'd met together, or who had known us as a unit for so long they'd forgotten we were individuals first. "I'm not asking anyone to choose sides," I said. "I just need time to figure out what I want my life to look like." "And what are you discovering?" I thought about that question as I walked Jennifer to the door an hour later. What was I discovering? That I liked quiet mornings without the pressure of someone else's schedule dictating my day. That I enjoyed cooking for myself, trying new recipes without worrying whether Nathan would complain if dinner wasn't ready exactly when he wanted it. That I could read for hours without being interrupted by someone asking where the remote was or whether I'd seen his keys. But more than that, I was discovering who Caroline was when she wasn't constantly trying to be the wife Nathan wanted. I was funnier than I'd remembered, more creative, more decisive. I had opinions about things beyond what to make for dinner or which Netflix show to watch. Over the following week, I established new routines that felt authentically mine. I started each morning with coffee on the front porch, watching the world wake up around me. I'd spend the afternoon working on small improvements to the house, organizing Dad's workshop in the basement, replanting Mom's neglected flower beds, painting the guest bedroom a soft yellow that reminded me of sunshine. These weren't dramatic transformations, but they felt significant. Each small choice, I made without having to consider Nathan's preferences, was like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. On Thursday afternoon, I was on my hands and knees in the front garden, pulling weeds from around Mom's old rose bushes, when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned to see a man I didn't recognize, standing at the edge of the yard. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "I'm looking for Robert Sullivan's daughter." I heard she might be staying here. That's me. I'm Caroline. He was tall and lean, probably in his early 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt that had seen better days, and his hands showed the calluses of someone who worked with tools. I'm Michael Torres. I worked for your dad for the past 5 years. I wanted to come by and offer my condolences, and also to ask about some equipment. Oh, you're Michael. I stood up, brushing dirt off my knees. Dad mentioned you all the time. He said you were the best carpenter he'd ever worked with. A smile crossed his face. He was a good man to work for. Fair, honest, always willing to teach if you wanted to learn. I was sorry I couldn't make it to the funeral. I was on a job site upstate and couldn't get back in time. Dad would have understood. He always said the work came first. About the equipment, Michael continued. Your brother Eric said I could buy some of the tools from the shop. There's a table saw and a planer that would really help me out if I can afford them. Of course. Eric's handling all the business assets, but I'm sure we can work something out. Would you like to come in for some iced tea? It's hot out here. Michael hesitated. I don't want to impose. I know this must be a difficult time. It would be nice to hear some stories about Dad. I feel like I knew him as a father, but not so much as a boss and mentor. We sat on the back porch, overlooking Mom's old garden, glasses of iced tea sweating in the afternoon heat. Michael told me about Dad's patience when teaching new skills, his insistence on doing every job right even when it meant longer hours, his habit of bringing homemade cookies to job sites that Mom had made before she got sick. He talked about you and Eric all the time, Michael said. He was so proud of both of you, but especially proud of how you took care of your mother during her illness. He said you had the biggest heart of anyone he knew. He said that many times. He used to worry that people would take advantage of your kindness, that you'd give so much of yourself to others that you'd forget to save some for yourself. The observation hit closer to home than Michael could have known. I thought about all the ways I'd diminished myself in my marriage, all the times I'd put Nathan's comfort ahead of my own needs, all the moments I'd swallowed my own words to avoid conflict. He sounds like he was a wise man, I said. The wisest I ever knew. He had a saying, a house is just wood and nails until love moves in. I think he meant that about more than just construction. We talked for another hour about Dad's work philosophy, his dedication to craftsmanship, his belief that every job was a reflection of the person doing it. Michael had learned carpentry from his father too, but his relationship had been more complicated, marked by criticism and impossible standards. Your dad taught me that making mistakes was part of learning, Michael said. My father taught me that mistakes were signs of weakness. Very different approaches. As he prepared to leave, Michael hesitated at the front door. I hope this isn't out of line, but if you ever need any help with the house, I'd be happy to lend a hand. Your dad always said this place was his masterpiece, and I'd hate to see it fall into disrepair. That's very kind of you. I might take you up on that. After Michael left, I sat on the front porch thinking about our conversation. There was something calming about his presence, the way he listened without trying to fix or change what I was saying. He reminded me of Dad in that way, comfortable with silence, present without being demanding. That evening, my phone rang. Nathan's name appeared on the screen, and I hesitated before answering. It was the first time he'd called since I'd moved out a week ago. Caroline, we need to talk. Okay. Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? Or I could come by the house. I'd rather meet somewhere neutral. How about the coffee shop on Main Street? Tomorrow at 10. Fine. But Caroline, we can't keep doing this. People are starting to ask questions. What kind of questions? About where you are, why you're not at home, whether we're having problems. I don't know what to tell them. You could tell them the truth. There was a long pause. What truth is that? That we're taking time to evaluate our marriage. Is that what we're doing? Because it feels like you're just running away. I'm not running away, Nathan. I'm running toward something. I just don't know what it is yet. After we hung up, I realized how different I sounded. Calmer, more certain of myself. The constant need to explain and justify my feelings was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence in my right to make choices about my own life. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early and chose a table by the window where I could watch the street. Main Street was busy with the usual Friday morning rush. Commuters stopping for coffee, business people hurrying to meetings, mothers pushing strollers toward the park. Nathan arrived exactly on time, looking polished in his business casual uniform of khakis and a button-down shirt. He'd gotten a haircut since I'd last seen him, and I wondered if that was for my benefit or if he was already moving on with his life. He ordered his usual black coffee and sat across from me, his posture formal and guarded. "You look good," he said, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. "Thank you." Different. Relaxed. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I waited for him to continue. "Caroline, I've been thinking about what you said. About us not talking, about me not being present. Maybe you have a point." This was not what I'd expected. Nathan rarely admitted to being wrong about anything, especially not relationship issues. "I've been under a lot of pressure at work," he continued. "The Peterson account has been a nightmare, and I've been bringing that stress home with me. I know I haven't been the most attentive husband lately." "Lately?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Nathan, this isn't about lately. This is about years of feeling like I don't matter to you unless I'm making your life easier." "That's not true." "Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me how I was feeling and actually waited to hear the answer? When was the last time you changed your plans because I needed you? When was the last time you chose me over something else you wanted to do?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I work hard to provide for us. Everything I do is for our future together. But what about our present together? What about right now? I don't understand what you want from me, Caroline. I'm a good husband. I don't cheat. I don't drink too much. I don't gamble or hit you or any of the things that actually matter." His definition of a good husband was so minimal it was almost laughable. Don't cheat, don't abuse, don't have addictions. As if simply avoiding the worst behaviors was enough to sustain a marriage. "Those are the basics of being a decent human being," I said. "They're not the same thing as being a loving partner. So what would make me a loving partner in your opinion?" The question seemed genuine, but I realized that if he had to ask, he might not be capable of understanding the answer. "Remember when we first started dating?" I said instead. "You used to bring me coffee at work just because you were thinking about me. You'd call me at random times during the day to tell me something funny you'd heard. When I was stressed about a project, you'd run me a bath and make dinner so I could relax. That was different. We were dating then. We were trying to impress each other. So after we got married, you stopped trying to impress me? You stopped thinking about what would make me happy." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. "I guess I thought that once we were married, I didn't have to work so hard anymore. I thought you'd just know that I loved you. But love isn't just a feeling, Nathan. It's a choice you make every day. It's actions and words and showing up and paying attention. Like your father said in his letter." "Yes, like Dad said." We sat in silence for several minutes, watching people walk past the window. I could see Nathan processing what I'd said, and for a moment I wondered if this conversation might actually change something between us. "What would it take," he asked finally, "for you to come home?" The fact that he saw it as me coming back to him, rather than us working together to build something new, told me everything I needed to know about his mindset. "I don't know if I want to come home, Nathan. I don't know if what we had was ever really working, or if I was just so used to it that I didn't realize how unhappy I was." "So that's it? 7 years of marriage, and you're just done?" "I'm not done. I'm just finally being honest about what I need." "And what do you need?" "I need a partner who sees me as a whole person, not just a wife who's supposed to make his life easier. I need someone who's curious about my thoughts and feelings, who wants to share his inner world with me too. I need someone who shows up for the hard stuff, not just the easy stuff." Nathan's jaw tightened. "And you don't think I can be that person?" "I don't know. Can you?" "I could try." "Nathan, this isn't about trying harder to do the same things. This is about fundamentally changing how you see our relationship. And honestly, I'm not sure you want to change. I think you want me to come back and pretend everything's fine, so your life can go back to normal." He didn't deny it, which told me I was right. "So where does that leave us?" he asked. "I don't know. I really don't know." We finished our coffee in uncomfortable silence, both of us recognizing that this conversation hadn't brought us any closer to resolution. If anything, it had made the gulf between us more apparent. As we prepared to leave, Nathan tried one more time. "Caroline, I love you. I know I'm not perfect, but doesn't 7 years of marriage count for something? Of course it counts. But staying married, just because we've been married, isn't a good enough reason anymore. I want more than that. More than what? More than coexistence. More than convenience. More than just not being alone. Walking back to my car, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the dreams we'd started with, the hopes we both had for our marriage when we were young and optimistic. Relief that I'd finally been honest about what I needed and discovered that Nathan couldn't or wouldn't provide it. For the first time since leaving our house, I felt certain that I'd made the right choice. Not just in leaving, but in refusing to settle for less than what I deserved. The question now was what came next. 2 weeks after my coffee shop conversation with Nathan, I was sitting in Dad's study going through his business files when I found a folder labeled Caroline's Projects. Inside were sketches and notes he'd made over the years for home improvement ideas specifically for me, plans to convert the sunroom into an art studio, designs for built-in bookshelves in the living room, even a rough blueprint for expanding the kitchen. At the bottom of the folder was a note in his handwriting. For when Caroline comes home. The phrase made me catch my breath. Dad had always believed I'd end up in this house, had been planning for it even when I was married and seemingly settled elsewhere. It was as if he'd seen the future more clearly than I had. I spread the sketches across his desk and studied them with fresh eyes. The art studio idea was particularly appealing. I'd given up painting years ago, partly because Nathan said the smell of oils bothered him, and partly because there was no dedicated space in our sterile suburban house for creative messes. My phone rang, interrupting my daydreaming. Eric's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, how are you holding up over there?" My brother's voice carried the warmth I'd always associated with family phone calls before Nathan had made them feel like obligations. Better than expected. I found Dad's secret project folder for the house. "Oh, you found those." He'd been working on those plans for years. Always talking about how you belonged in that house, how it was meant for you. Did he really think I'd end up here? "Caroline, Dad saw how unhappy you were long before you admitted it to yourself. He hoped you'd find the courage to choose yourself over a bad marriage. The inheritance was just his way of making sure you'd have options when you were ready." I wiped away tears I hadn't realized were forming. "I miss him." "Me too. But you know what? I think he'd be proud of you right now. You're finally doing what he always hoped you'd do, putting your own happiness first." After we hung up, I walked through the house, looking at it with Dad's eyes. He'd seen potential here not just for renovations, but for a life. My life. A life where I could spread out, create, make choices based on what brought me joy rather than what avoided conflict. That afternoon, I called Michael Torres. He'd left his business card when he'd visited, and I'd been thinking about his offer to help with house projects. "Caroline, how are you settling in?" "Well, actually, that's why I'm calling. I found some plans my father made for renovating the sunroom, and I wondered if you might take a look at them." "I'd be happy to. When would be convenient?" We arranged to meet the next morning. I spent the evening going through more of Dad's files, finding receipts and warranties for appliances, contact information for contractors and suppliers, even a detailed maintenance schedule he'd created for keeping the old house in good condition. Everything was organized and thoughtful, designed to make my transition as smooth as possible. It was like receiving one final gift from him, the gift of being cared for and prepared for. Michael arrived promptly at 9, carrying a thermos of coffee and a measuring tape. He studied Dad's sketches with the careful attention of someone who understood both vision and practicality. "These are good plans," he said, running his finger along the lines Dad had drawn. "Your father knew what he was doing. This sunroom gets perfect light for an art studio, and the electrical work wouldn't be too complicated. How long would something like this take?" "A few weeks, depending on how elaborate you want to go." "Are you thinking of doing it?" "I'm thinking about a lot of things lately." Michael smiled. "Change can be good. Sometimes we get so used to things being one way that we forget other ways are possible." Over the next hour, he walked me through the renovation process, explaining what would be involved, giving me rough estimates for materials and labor. His approach was educational rather than sleazy, more interested in helping me understand my options than in pushing me toward a quick decision. "You don't have to decide anything today," he said as he packed up his tools. "But if you do want to move forward, I'd be honored to work on your father's final project for this house. After he left, I stood in the sunroom imagining it transformed. Canvas and easels where Mom's orchid tables used to be. Natural light streaming through the windows onto works in progress. The smell of paint and turpentine, the satisfying messiness of creation. For the first time in years, I felt excited about a future I could actually envision. That evening, Nathan called again. His tone was different this time, more formal and businesslike. "Caroline, I think we need to discuss the practical aspects of this separation." "What do you mean?" "Our finances, the house, how long this is going to continue. I can't keep telling people you're just taking time to grieve. What would you like to tell them instead?" "The truth, I suppose, that we're separated and trying to figure out if we want to stay married." The word, separated, hung in the air between us. It was the first time either of us had used that term, and it made our situation feel more real and more permanent. "Is that what we're doing?" I asked. "Trying to figure out if we want to stay married? Aren't we?" I thought about that question for a long moment. Was I trying to save our marriage, or was I trying to find the courage to end it? "Nathan, can I ask you something honestly? Are you happy? In our marriage, in our life together, are you genuinely happy?" The pause before his answer told me everything I needed to know. "I'm comfortable," he said finally. "We have a good life. A nice house, stable jobs, financial security. We don't fight much. We have the same friends, similar goals. But are you happy?" I don't know if happiness is realistic after 7 years of marriage. I think contentment is more realistic. "And you're content with contentment, aren't you?" "No," I said without hesitation. "I'm not. I want more than that." "Caroline, you're 32 years old. You're not 22 anymore. You can't expect marriage to be like some romantic movie. I'm not expecting a romantic movie. I'm expecting a partnership. I'm expecting someone who's interested in me as a person, who wants to grow and change and experience life together, not just coexist in the same house." That sounds exhausting. And there it was. The fundamental difference between us laid bare. What I saw as the exciting challenge of building a life together, he saw as work to be avoided. "Maybe it would be exhausting with the wrong person," I said. "But it should be energizing with the right person." "So I'm the wrong person?" "I don't know. Maybe we're wrong for each other." Another long silence stretched between us. I could hear the television in the background on his end. Some sports broadcast he was probably half watching while we had this life-altering conversation. "I want you to come home," he said eventually. "I want to try to work this out." "What does trying look like to you?" "I don't know. Counseling, maybe. Talking more. I could try to be more attentive." The words sounded hollow, like he was reciting lines from a script about how to save a marriage rather than expressing genuine desire for change. "Nathan, do you want to work it out because you love me and want us both to be happy, or because being married is easier than being divorced?" "That's not fair." "It's a fair question." He was quiet for so long I thought the call might have dropped. "I don't know how to answer that," he admitted finally. "Then maybe that's your answer." Over the following days, I found myself thinking less about Nathan and our marriage and more about the life I was creating for myself. I started each morning with coffee and the newspaper on the front porch, something I'd never had time for when I was rushing to coordinate breakfast and schedules with Nathan. I painted the guest bedroom the sunny yellow I'd envisioned, finding deep satisfaction in the physical work of transformation. I planted new flowers in Mom's old garden beds, researching which varieties would thrive in the specific light conditions of each area. Small accomplishments, but they felt significant because they were entirely my own choices, made for no one's pleasure but my own. Jennifer visited frequently, often bringing her youngest daughter Emma, who was fascinated by the old house and loved exploring the nooks and crannies that made it different from her modern home. "Aunt Caroline, why do the floors make noise?" Emma asked during one visit, stomping experimentally on the hardwood. "Because the house is old, sweetie. It's settled and shifted over the years. The sounds are just the house talking." "What does it say?" I laughed, but then considered the question seriously. "I think it says, 'Welcome home.'" Jennifer gave me a knowing look over Emma's head. The house did feel like home in a way nowhere else ever had, not even the house I'd shared with Nathan for 7 years. That weekend, Michael returned to start the preliminary work on the sunroom renovation. I watched him carefully measure and mark, his movements precise and thoughtful. There was something deeply satisfying about watching skilled hands create something beautiful and functional. Your father taught me that every renovation is really about possibility, he said as we took a break for lunch on the back porch. You're not just changing the structure of a space, you're changing what's possible in your life. Is that what I'm doing? Isn't it? He was right. The sunroom renovation was just the visible symbol of a much larger transformation. I was renovating my entire life, tearing down the walls that had confined me and building something that fit the person I was becoming. Over lunch, Michael told me about his own life changes. He'd been married young, divorced at 30 when he and his wife realized they'd grown into completely different people. It had been painful but ultimately liberating. The hardest part, he said, was admitting that something I'd invested so much time and energy in wasn't working. It felt like failure. But it wasn't. No, it was just incompatibility. No one's fault, really. We were both good people who couldn't make each other happy. I thought about that conversation all afternoon. Nathan and I weren't bad people. We'd just never been compatible in the ways that mattered most. We'd been trying to force a connection that had never really existed beyond physical attraction and shared circumstances. That evening, I made a decision that had been building for weeks. I called Nathan. I want a divorce, I said without preamble. The words hung in the air between us, final and frightening and strangely liberating. Caroline, don't make any hasty decisions. We haven't even tried counseling yet. Nathan, we've been trying for 7 years. We've been trying to make something work that was never going to work, not in the way either of us deserves. So that's it? You're just giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm choosing something better. For both of us. Better for you, maybe. What about me? You'll find someone who's content with contentment. Someone who doesn't need the kind of emotional connection I need. Someone who'll be happy with the life you want to live. And what if I don't want to find someone else? What if I want to find a way to make this work? Do you? Really? Or do you just want to avoid the inconvenience of starting over? He was quiet for a long time. In the background, I could hear the familiar sounds of our old life. The hum of the dishwasher, the drone of the television, the hollow echo of a house where two people lived separate lives under the same roof. I guess I don't know, he said finally. That's okay. Not knowing is an answer, too. We talked for another hour about logistics, lawyers, property division, the house we'd shared. It was surprisingly civil, more like two business partners dissolving a partnership than two people ending a marriage. Maybe that's what we'd always been. After we hung up, I sat on Dad's front porch as darkness settled over the neighborhood. I felt sad but not devastated, regretful but not hopeless. 7 years was a significant chunk of life to let go of, but it was also a foundation to build on. I thought about Dad's letter, about his hope that I'd find someone who chose me every single day. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But either way, I was finally choosing myself, and that felt like the most important love story of all. A few days later, Michael finished the electrical work for the sunroom renovation. We stood together looking at the transformed space, clean white walls, perfect lighting, built-in storage for art supplies exactly where Dad had envisioned it. It's beautiful, I said, running my hand along the smooth wood of the storage cabinets. Your father would be proud. He always said this house would come alive when the right person was living in it. And you think I'm the right person? Michael smiled, and I noticed for the first time how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was genuinely happy. I think you're becoming the right person. For this house, for your life, for whatever comes next. That weekend, I set up my easel in the new studio and painted for the first time in 5 years. My hands were rusty, my technique uncertain, but the joy of creation came flooding back like muscle memory. Colors and light and possibilities spreading across the canvas, messy and beautiful and entirely mine. Outside the windows, I could see the garden I was slowly bringing back to life, the porch where I'd found peace, the street where I'd learned to be alone without being lonely. Inside, I could feel Dad's presence in every carefully planned detail, his love made manifest in wood and stone and the gift of a place to call home. I was 32 years old, newly divorced, starting over in ways I'd never imagined. But for the first time in years, I was excited about what tomorrow might bring. The house on Maple Street had taught me that sometimes you have to tear things down to their foundations before you can build something beautiful. Sometimes you have to choose yourself before you can choose anyone else. And sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property, but the courage to believe you deserve a life that makes you happy. As I cleaned my brushes that evening, watching the paint swirl away in the studio sink Michael had installed, I thought about the letter Dad had left me. He'd seen my potential before I'd seen it myself, had given me not just the means to change my life but the permission to do so. The sun was setting through the windows, casting golden light across my new workspace. Tomorrow I'd paint again, and the day after that. I'd tend the garden and read books on the porch and make choices based on what brought me joy rather than what avoided conflict. I'd build a life worthy of the love that had created it, one careful, intentional choice at a time. And maybe, if I was very lucky, I'd find someone to share it with who understood that love isn't just a feeling, but a choice you make every single day.